Time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
to me, it all starts with our pitching. When we pitch well, we win. When we're inconsistent, when we don't throw strikes, that's when we struggle. And on some of those days, our offense has been able to bail us out, and some they have not. But when we're at our best, we're pitching really well, and that means the starters and also the bullpen. When our starters give us great outings, we tend to win that game.
Well, I think anytime your best players are swinging the bat well, that's a good thing. So, if Seth and Logan and Chris, if those guys are hitting well, we're probably scoring a bunch of runs. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he's hot. He had a great week in Durham, and hopefully he can carry that momentum into this weekend.
And a pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network for a Tuesday edition on the 29th day of May 2018, along with the Hall of Fame honored Phil Kornblut and Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic, and Brian Leonard behind the glass, turning the dials, making us sound fantastic on our 28 terrestrial affiliates in the Palmetto State. Also online at SportsTalkSC.com, on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, and on Periscope as well. You can check us out in a variety of different places, and also on TuneIn Radio. Just go to our affiliate in Columbia who never preempts us, the folks at The Point Radio, and they will take you to our program. So, when we look at everything, when it comes to this week, we are dealing with three main things. We're dealing with the SEC meetings in Destin. We're dealing with Brian Bowen's decision tomorrow that will come down, whether or not he wants to stay in the NBA draft or possibly come back to play for the Gamecocks next year at a time that will be determined by the NCAA. And we're also looking, of course, at the Field of 64 yesterday being set for the NCAA baseball tournament. We were here yesterday, broke down the field for you. South Carolina playing in a regional in Greenville, Clemson hosting a regional of their own, as is Coastal Carolina. We'll talk to their head coach, Gary Gilmore, about an hour from now at 7:05. We're going to talk to Ray Tanner, the man who chaired the NCAA tournament committee, and we will ask him specific questions pertaining to Clemson's seeding and whether or not the seeding was, in the words of some who have criticized him, done via a random draw or by luck of the draw, if you will, because there was some consternation last night about where Clemson fit in with the other teams, not only in the ACC, but in the top 16. We also heard from both head coaches today. You'll hear those comments here today. Corn, you were at USC. What did you learn from Mark Kingston?
Well, I learned that, for him, it's a step up in, certainly importance, because now you're into the postseason. I mean, with Kingston, it's every game is the same. Tries to take that one game approach, win the next game attitude, and he tried to bring that again today. He didn't show any immediate urgency, but he did, of course, express the fact that this team has come a long way since the midpoint when they were 20-17 and looking like they weren't going to make any postseason play. So he's very proud of his team for doing that, considering all the injuries that they have dealt with. And, they're still playing without two regular field position players in one form or another. TJ Hopkins remains out in terms of being able to play in a regular way. He can pinch run, and he can go out and play a little defense for him late in the ball game. Madison Stokes, of course, is playing and hitting well, but they're not going to use him in the field. They're going to keep him regulated to the DH role because, A, they've been playing so well on defense with their current alignment with Tolbert at short and Rowe at second, Williams at first. And they don't want to mess with that. And then again, they don't want to run the risk of him injuring that hamstring and losing his bat as well. So they have overcome quite a lot to get to where they are as they prepare to take on Ohio State on Friday. They're going to see a left-hander against Ohio State, as we talked about last night, number one guy on their staff, their typical Friday night starter. And, left-handers can be dicey at times. And they also know that if it's late and they're in a losing situation, Ohio State can run out a really good closer. So the key for them is getting on the board early, getting a lead, and not being in a position where Ohio State can work their bullpen and get to their big-time closer at the end.
Well, I just remember what happened when they faced Missouri, the left-handed starters that they brought about, and how Mark Kingston said that that's something that they have trouble simulating with those dreaded pitching machines, and how just the look is different pro, and so much from South Carolina's perspective has relied on their offense, but he believes that their pitching is going to dictate things.
Here's the funny thing about it. So many times we've seen recently guys trying to bring out left-handers against South Carolina. By this time, they ought to be used to them. I mean, they may have been confused before, but now they see that different rotation. They'll be ready for it. As far as Madison Stokes is concerned, as we said in baseball, it seems that the weakest fielder, especially in postseason, finds the baseball. You can almost think that Madison Stokes is going to be on first, and somebody's going to hit one to the wall, and he'll have to stretch it out. And you can see, you can almost see the coaching staff going, just ease it on in there, just get the third.
It's of course, and they've not named a starter for Friday. Neither has Clemson. Clemson head coach Monty Lee and their players also spoke today. They had to be inside today for the second consecutive day in the upstate as rains continue to basically shower the Palmetto State. He believes that they might be indoors as late as Thursday, so that would give them some limited field time as far as the injuries are concerned for the Tigers to open up their play against Morehead State Friday night at 6 o'clock. Keir Meredith is swinging a bat. He's hitting off a tee. He basically has done so over the last couple of days. They're still not sure whether or not he's going to see live pitching, and they want to at least try to get him to do at least some soft toss and also see different things, how they can test that shoulder. But it looks like, at least going into the weekend, he might still be limited. Grayson Bird did see some action in the ACC championship game as a pinch hitter and also as a DH. His running the base paths is, though, very similar to Madison Stokes. They do not want him to re-aggravate that quad. So from that perspective, Clemson is at least dealing with a limited situation there. Jacob Hennessy is available. He would have pitched on Sunday had Clemson advanced, and he also was available out of the bullpen for Clemson Saturday against Florida State. They still have not named a starter, but Corn, you'd have to think, and again, we've been talking about this and really just talking about the consternation around Clemson and where they're seated. This has to be a favorable situation for them because they're facing a Morehead State team that has offense, but really not a lot of pitching. Clemson's offense should be able to feast in game one.
Oh, I would think so. I think they might have another one of those 17-run innings like they had in the ACC tournament. Morehead is a team that, they play in the OVC, so they're not really challenged greatly there. And you look at their numbers, good offensive team, as you pointed out, but they're not seeing great pitching. But their pitching, their team ERA is up around 6.
I could hit that.
Yeah, so Clemson, I tell you who you need to be watching out for. Of course, Vandy's there, but this St. John's team,
they're spunky.
They won the Beast. They've got pitching.
They're spunky.
They can throw 4 starters at you, all with ERAs in the mid-2s, and they have a closer who appears to be, just looking at his numbers, he appears to be pretty nasty. They have a couple of guys they can run out there to close, but one in particular has 6 saves. Joe LaRosa, ERA of 1.87. This was going into their tournament. And then they have a second with 5 saves, Gavin Hallowell, and teams are hitting off of him 146. So they have got pitching. And that Vanderbilt matchup with them should be quite interesting. The thing is, whoever Clemson faces in the second round, whether it's Vandy or St. John's, assuming they take care of Morehead State, they're going to see a good second-round pitcher.
One of the great things about the product of college baseball right now, especially at its highest level, is because they got rid of the gorilla ball bats or whatever. That means more teams around the country will find quality pitchers who want to play college baseball. It used to be that, you get a few to play, but not many because
you turn them into hitters because usually the best athletes.
Exactly. So they've decided they're going to come to college and pitch, and that means more pitching going around, especially in the northern region. You can remember when Frank Viola pitched for Seton Hall, I believe it was. They've always had some good pitchers.
Well, geographically, just because you play so many of your games in colder temperatures in the north, you have to have pitching because runs come at a premium, and so much of that, again, when you basically it's the law of science. The ball travels farther in the warmer weather than it does in the cold, and so you need pitching.
And I was about to say, as far as Clemson is concerned, Monty Lee is not worried about where they're seated. His worry is, look, we've got a regional again, and this time we want to come out of it. I don't care if we have to go on the road or not. We need to win our regional at home.
Certainly has been a bit of a ceiling for his team since he has been there. We'll come back. We'll continue to talk about the NCAA tournament, more about Coastal Carolina. We'll get to your phone calls as well, 800-956-7266. And Ray Tanner coming up in about 20 minutes' time as well. Packed Sports Talk continues next.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Now we're brought to you by the South Carolina Soybean Board. Using your data to make informed farm management decisions improves your sustainable footprint. Show your commitment to sustainability with a free truck magnet available at unitedsoybean.org/sustainable. This message brought to you by your South Carolina Soybean Checkoff. You had a recruiting note you wanted to bring about?
Yeah, we've been watching a recruit from Canada and South Carolina basketball player for this class, A.J. Lawson, 6'6", out of GTA Prep in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. And we originally had him down for visiting this coming weekend based on what his coaches told us. But he came in this past weekend for his official visit to USC. So we will follow up on that and find out how that visit went and where things stand with him. SMU, Tulane, Creighton, and Oregon are the other schools that he has been considering. We'll have more in recruiting coming up for you, as well as an update on Josiah James out of Portugal, the 6'6", big-time 2019 recruit that USC and Clemson are dying to keep in state. This is the kind of player you got to keep him in state. You got to keep Jawan Gary in state. You got to keep Malcolm Wilson in state and others like that. Trey Hannibal. It's a good year in 2019 in South Carolina. You got to keep these guys in state if you're Clemson and South Carolina, if you're going to really prosper with your basketball program.
We're talking, of course, a lot about the SEC meetings. We're going to speak to Ray Tanner at those meetings coming up at 6:30. One of the things he spoke about today was Brian Bowen, and he said that they're going to have some clarity. We'll try to get some more information on that clarity. John is calling from Rock Hill at 800-956-7266 and wants to speak about that very issue, guys. What's up, John?
Nothing. It's kind of a two-parter. Like, one is my just opinion on how the NCAA is just handling this whole situation. And then the second part of the question, like, my opinion is this is just wrong in what the NCAA is doing with him, because he has to make a decision here in 24 hours, whether to come back to school or go pro. And then I'm just wondering, that was my I think what the NCAA is wrong, and that whole situation.
I mean, we're not necessarily anywhere right now, in my opinion, just
problem.
because, and I don't think there's really any other opinion other than to say it's wrong unless you work inside the offices in Indianapolis, Corn.
Yeah, it's just been crazy from that young man's standpoint, and the NCAA should have. Yeah, I mean, the NCAA should tell him something so he can have an informed decision in front of him, and whatever they've got that they think is something that might put him in a jeopardized situation from an eligibility standpoint, then his attorney should know this, his family should know this, or so that he can decide, okay, I know what the NCAA thinks they have. They're not going to let me play for either another year or X number of games, so now I can make a clear decision about joining a professional league somewhere. Or if they think, hey, listen, you're clear, you're good to go, we might suspend you for 7 games or whatever the case may be, then he can decide whether or not he wants to do that. But to leave him hanging out there without the clear information is really a poor way to handle this thing. I mean, I don't know how long has this thing been going on? This case broke in October.
It's about at least 6, 7, 8 months.
Yes, this case broke. I'm talking about the entire NCAA FBI investigation broke right about the time practice started in October.
Before the season.
So for an organization that can move at breakneck speed to put Prairie View A&M on 3 years probation for letting a kid's family stay in a hotel overnight and the school pay for it. I'm just using that as an example. And then move like a snail when it comes to something like this is pretty ridiculous.
Now, let's leave the equation of the NCAA out of it, if we may, and just talk about Brian Bourne as a basketball player. I know physically probably there are some guys can pull it off, but in my opinion, if he does not know what's going to happen as far as the NCAA is concerned, he's got to go somewhere and play basketball. I mean, to sit out 2 years with no basketball competition and your body's still developing. We don't know what his body will look like in the next 6 or 7 months, but he's still growing. It would be very difficult for him to adjust to playing at the highest level at that point, even the G League.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever decision he makes, it has to be paramount that he gets on the court and play live competition.
We know we had Charles on the line before. If you dropped us, Charles, feel free to give us a call back, 800-956-7266. Let's go to Glenn in North Charleston. Glenn, you're on Sports Talk. What's up?
I tell you, I look up to people in the Carolina baseball team, the way they played each team and made it this far. You can't say anything bad about South Carolina, because these kids really tried their best to do it, and they still going in it. I mean, they go by game to game, I think. Don't worry about who's ahead or who's behind or whatever, So I think their attitude, they're going to be in there pretty good.
I mean, they have really done a very good job at, again, rescuing their season. And, five consecutive series wins.
Think about it. They lost to Presbyterian on April 17th.
That made them, 20-17?
Mm-hmm. And on this program on April 18th, we pretty much torpedoed the season. Like, what are you doing? You can't lose to, PC.
We were asking
300 RPI team. You're 20-17. You were losing almost every midweek game you were playing to in-state teams.
We were asking the blame game, basically. We're saying, who is this to blame? Is this Mark Kingston's fault? Is this Chad Holbrook's fault?
I think I know what I said. I said this team has got talent. This team was not left barren. It has got, and I named the lineup. And at the time, can't remember. Part of the problem was the injuries. Of course, Hopkins was out. Rowe was out for a while.
They had just gotten Hopkins back.
Yeah, I mean, so they were in and out trying to put together a lineup. But, I mean, things looked dire for them on April 17th. And here we are now, little over a month later, a month and 10 days. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, they finished up, as we pointed out, best record second half in the SEC, and made a respectable showing in Hoover. You know, they went 1-2, but the second loss was to a team that made it to the championship, and they lost in 12 innings. So that was a very close ball game. And they have got some legitimate momentum and confidence going into this thing. I would not be surprised if they don't win a couple of games and have a chance to maybe win this thing sometime on Sunday or Monday.
But I remember a certain person sitting at his table and said, what that day, sometimes in order to get a bounce, you got to hit rock bottom.
I believe that was
That's exactly
Do you
what
ever
I
pull
said.
a muscle when you pat yourself on the back?
I don't know.
Do you
He-
ever,
No,
you know,
he
are you
learns
flexible enough to do that?
He learns from the best over here to my
No,
left.
but the interesting thing is,
I don't have to pat myself on the back. Others do it for me.
I tell you what, an old minister of mine used to say, sometimes if you don't pat yourself on the back, nobody else will.
Well, see, that's the difference between you and me.
I have nothing to pat myself about. But as far as
No argument there.
Stop it. As far as South Carolina is concerned, they have a lot to be proud of. And again, you know, just from the standpoint of, you know, and I know South Carolina fans will look at this season and they'll wonder, you know, whether or not you take this for granted, you know, whether they took it for granted the year they didn't make it with Holbrook. I mean, you have to understand this is a part of the surge back, if you will. And similarly for Clemson, I mean, Clemson has gotten to a certain level under Monty Lee, like you said before. They got to get past that level. This is not just enough now for them to be hosting regionals. And I know it might chap South Carolina fans to think just getting into the tournament is something that we should be grateful for. But again, it's something that needs to happen.
Well, they had to do it this year because, I mean, this, you know, Kingston inherited a good enough team to win, and he did as far as getting them to the tournament. So he did that. They are going to take a big hit in terms of personnel losses after this year. Next year, personnel-wise, will be kind of a rebuild in terms of new people. You're going to see a lot of new people in the lineup for the Gamecocks next year. So this was a year, even though they were picked kind of low in the SEC, I think it was a year based on the talent that it was still reasonable to think that they could make it. I want to point out, just looking at the forecast for Greenville, North Carolina for Friday afternoon, 92 degrees, thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon on Friday. But
lightning,
prepare for heat in Greenville, North Carolina.
We're going to talk to Ray Tanner, South Carolina Athletic Director, about the tournament, Brian Bowen, and the SEC meetings next. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. I believe it was an old Southeastern Conference fable. There are no easy roads to Destin. Ray Tanner, South Carolina Athletic Director, took the road less traveled from Indianapolis to Mobile to the Florida Panhandle. Corn.
Good time to be there as the old tropical storm comes blowing through. Speaking of a storm, there's a bit of a storm in the upstate of South Carolina after the Field of 64 was announced yesterday. We welcome in the athletics director at USC and the chairman of the baseball tournament selection committee, Ray Tanner. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon, Phil. How are you doing?
We're great. Thank you for joining us. I know it's been a very busy time for you, and we're glad that you joined us here on Sports Talk. So I think from what we can gather, seems like the Gamecock people are pretty happy with what happened for them. The Chanticleer people are pretty happy for what happened with them with the committee. Maybe not so much with the Clemson people about being a number 10 national seed, though they are going to be hosting, but maybe not so crazy about some of the teams in their regional. How do you answer them, the Clemson people, who say committee did not do it right by Clemson?
Well, I'll tell you that the amount of time that we spent putting together the field from Friday until Monday when I departed to come down to Destin, the longest period of time spent was seeding probably 6 through 11 at one setting. And of all the things that we had to do to put the field together, that was probably the most time that we spent in trying to get that right. It was very difficult. It was razor thin among those teams and all the metrics that we used. And I think that yesterday I mistakenly used the word interchangeable with that group. Well, they weren't interchangeable. Separation between 6 through 11. Was it drastic? No, it wasn't drastic. You're talking about 10 or 11 of the best teams in the country. So there's a reason they're at the top, and they're not separated by much. So, we have a boatload of metrics that we use, and some of them are in your favor and some of them are not. And that at the end of the day, we felt like that we got them in the order that they were supposed to be. One of the things that at the end, when we did get the seeds, you got the Clemson Regional and the Florida State Regional matched up. That I know they'd be happy to play each other because that means they won the regional, but that's just the way it falls out. That's the way the seedings occurred, and it was just a coincidence that it happened that way. And Clemson they were right there. They were in the conversation of being a national, but there were some metrics that they didn't have quite as good as others, and I'll be glad to share a couple of those. Like the strength of schedule was 56. That was quite a bit higher than the teams that we're talking about from 6 through 11. Their non-conference strength of schedule was 115, which was twice as high as the other teams that we considered. The average opponent's RPI, the average opponent's rank, they were slightly outside of that group as well. So that's kind of how they ended up outside of the 8. They finished really good down the stretch, but a lot of their wins down the stretch were against teams that were not in the field at the end of the day. It's not a situation where you criticize them. They were very good, but there were small things of separation in there. I think how much I think of Monty Lee, and I was not gonna not be a part of a group that didn't scrub that exactly the way it needed to be to get it right. And that's why we spent so much time on it. And I understand I was not going to be very popular in the upstate regardless of what happened. So I get that, but I can assure you that and keep remembering I'm one person on the committee.
Yeah.
So I'm only 1/10 of the persuasion if there's any type of conversation that goes one way or the other. But you also get to vote, and it's a secret ballot. It's computer technology. We have secret rankings. We have secret balloting, and that's when we do the metrics, we put it. We vote to see if people agree with what we're looking at, and that's where we ended up where we were. I can assure you that it was an extremely fair process. That I'll say it again. Where Monty Lee's concerned, I'm not going to be wrong. I wouldn't do that. And that's, I know he feels good about his team, and he should. He has an outstanding team, and he did a lot of really good things, finishing tied with the Tar Heels and a really good record. And a tremendous season. But that's I think last year they, if I'm not mistaken, they barely got into the field. They nudged out some people to host, and this year they were just on the other side. My history, I was there too. I was in sometimes, and sometimes I was on the very edge. But I can assure you that it was done the right way.
So the lesson to be learned for Clemson and maybe any other school that's kind of in that situation, I mean, you look at their schedule, their non-conference schedule. Of course, they're playing 3 with South Carolina. They played 3 against Dallas Baptist, which in the preseason was a good-looking RPI situation for them. Coastal Carolina, they played twice. They played Georgia twice. Now, they do have some, Presbyterian, Kennesaw State, Austin Peay, people like that. But I mean, you were a coach and you put schedules together. You can't schedule top 50 RPI teams for every non-league game, can you? Can you afford to run that risk?
No, you bring up a good point. I'm going to go to basketball real quick. We have changed the way that we schedule in basketball. That you can't schedule a team in the SEC below RPIs of 150. Well, that's impossible in baseball. You can't do that. We're not going to charter airplanes on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights to go play somebody. That's just not going to be the case. You're going to play teams in your region. So, you just, let's go to the RPI. Your RPI is your record. It's your opponent's record and your opponent's record. That makes up that 100% of those 3 categories. And you have to be lucky a little bit that some of those teams down the line have really good years. We at South Carolina, we hurt ourselves by losing some of those games against the lower rated teams. And that is one reason our RPI is not as high as maybe it could have been. But yeah, he did what he could do, and he had a really good year. So there's some factors in there that he just couldn't control. Any given year, he could do the exact same thing and his numbers would look a little bit different. But when we're putting the field together, we have to use the metrics at our disposal to try to separate the teams, and that's where it came out. He did go 0-2 against Georgia. Could that have factored in? Well, you turn them around and things are a little bit different there. So it was razor thin, probably 6 through 11, and so you got a couple of teams on the outside looking in at the national 8. But he's a national seed. He's in the top 16, and he's playing at home.
Sure. Ray Tanner joining us here. One more on the baseball before we move on to other topics. How close, and again, this was not with you in the room because you had to recuse yourself, but how close did the committee come to putting South Carolina in its home state, either at Clemson or Coastal?
I was not in the room, and it was not discussed with me. I had to be recused, as did Chris Del Conte, who's on the committee from the University of Texas. They both said, you two guys can go visit. You're out of the room, and they got spoken to the tournament while we were out, and it was never discussed as to the process. And even with the regional placement, we weren't in the room for that either. We're not allowed to be a part of it. We're not you would think we could be in the room and maybe not speak. We're not allowed in the room. Mm-hmm. They shut the doors and we're removed. And so that's the way that it's done, to take out any type of bias whatsoever, or I guess any facial expressions, whatever the case may be. So that's the way that, the cases are settled. And if you have a team, you have to leave the room.
Well, now you know how we feel when y'all go into executive session in the boardroom.
Real quick on baseball before we hit a break in about 30 seconds. What was Coastal's strongest selling point for hosting?
Well, the fact that they were a double winner, and they had a great season. They won the regular season, they won the tournament. And Phil, this committee, you can establish parameters. And one of the parameters that we established was, we want teams that did well in their conference. When I say well, you won the regular season, maybe finished second, or you won your tournament, or you did both. Coastal was a double winner. They went into a pretty good conference, and they practically dominated, and they played a really good schedule otherwise too. So they were very deserving of being a host site.
We can hold you on for a couple more minutes, Coach.
Sure.
All right, Ray Tanner will join us coming up just again to talk a little bit about some more things, including the status of South Carolina's probably most prized basketball commitment, coming up next.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
More with the South Carolina Athletic Director, Ray Tanner. These are more thoughts specific to South Carolina. We are taking him off of the NCAA Baseball Committee chair position, at least out of that particular microscope, Corn. We have some questions, obviously, involving Gamecock basketball.
Yeah, Ray Tanner back with us from the SEC meetings now down in Destin, Florida. So tomorrow's the deadline for players to withdraw from the NBA draft, and everybody around South Carolina land, I guess, is waiting on Brian Bowen to announce what his plans will be. Can you shed any light on anything here at the next to last hour, so to speak, about what you're hearing, if anything, from the NCAA and his situation?
Well, as you would expect, for weeks now or even months, we've been trying to get in a position that Brian gets a chance to make a decision on what his future will be and what the options are. And we haven't gotten to that point, and we're nearing the deadline, and we continue to try to give him some direction. And it's out of our control. We you got the DOJ was involved, NCAA's involved, and today I have been given some indication that we will get some type of response. Now I don't have it, so I'm optimistic that we'll get something to share with Brian, before midnight tomorrow. I don't know exactly what it'll be, and I'm a little bit optimistic. I haven't been guaranteed that will be the case, but the conversations have led me to believe that we will be able to share something with him tomorrow. So that's basically all I can tell you, which is somewhat encouraging based on where we've been in the last few weeks, that we haven't had any information, and there's a possibility that we'll be able to get him some information to decide his future. How much will it be complete? I don't know any of that, but we're hopeful. We just, and I'm sure you all agree that he's got to make a decision on what he's going to do. He needs as much information as he can possibly get. He went to the combine, and he's gotten some feedback from that. He needs to know from an NCAA eligibility standpoint, based on his situation, how that unfolds if we can get to that point. So we're hopeful that we'll be in a better place for him, by tomorrow.
Well, being a coach, you know how difficult it is when a player's skills start to erode. Has any concerns been expressed to you about Brian really having to be in a competitive situation to play competitive basketball, no matter what level, that he can get back on track as far as getting his sea legs under him as far as basketball is concerned? Has that been discussed about part of his decision-making process?
Well, you're probably I'm getting out of my lane here talking about that, but like Coach Martin said, he jumped into the combine. He's starting to compete, and he really hasn't been in a competitive situation in quite a while, and it's going to take some time to get back to that, whether he's with us or he's in a professional situation. I think that's a valid point, but certainly Coach Martin has seen him enough at practice. He believes in his ability to, as a basketball player, to play at a high level. And but I think what is concerned, there's some. It takes a little bit of time to get your legs back under you.
Of course, you're at the SEC meetings now in Destin. We're talking with Ray Tanner, the USC athletic director. What are the issues at hand, if you will, and what legislation do you expect to take as you go throughout your meetings with the fellow athletic directors?
Well, we've got a few things. I don't expect any earth-shattering news coming out of the SEC, but then again, today is Tuesday, so we got meetings tomorrow, Thursday, and we finish up with a voting session on Friday morning that will have some SEC proposals as well as the NCAA proposals. And I don't expect anything that would make big headlines, but that's just some things that we've got to clear up: student athlete well-being issues and ticketing and things that we're not going to make the front page. So we'll see if there's anything else. There's going to be some discussions offline about things and online about things that are in the news now. The gambling issue and alcohol discussions continue to evolve, but I don't.
Did you say consumption or discussions? Alcohol consumption or discussions?
I said discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he said alcohol consumption.
Where do you sit on the issue of alcohol in stadiums?
Consumption? He's in favor.
No, I'm not in favor of consumption, for the record.
Okay.
I don't know. I think there's too many questions that are still unanswered, and I'm not trying to ride the fence, but obviously at a college football game on a Saturday afternoon, there's a lot of tailgating that goes on, and there is consumption at those tailgates. Well, if you have it inside the stadium, how does it affect it? Is there more risk? Is there less risk? Is people's safety and concern, the fan experience, bringing children to a game? I think we just got a lot of questions for me that I don't have the answers to. So it continues to evolve. As you know, some places it's moving faster than it is at others. But again, I'm not trying to ride the fence. I don't know where I stand. I don't think that I have enough information. Is there some money involved? Probably so, but based on what I can tell, it's not significant. All of a sudden, you're selling beer throughout the stadium, you're going to make millions of dollars. That doesn't appear to be the case, at least the math that I've done. So there's a lot more cost involved that goes along with it. So I don't know where I would end up if it was just my decision. I need more information. I need more studies. People's experience, the young people come to the game and safety. I got to have data that supports me being able to, if I had to make the decision.
Speaking of money, end of the week, you guys get the big check. Last year is about $41 million per school. I'm just wondering, do you get to touch the check? Do you stick it in your pocket and you bring it back to Columbia and deposit it in the USC account? Where's that money go?
I think this year you're included. I think that was one of the stipulations that you'll be included in the distribution.
Be happy to take a cut of that.
Well, I can't elaborate on that, but the Southeastern Conference is a great league. It's great to be a part of it. It's dangerous when you're competing, but it has its benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that distribution is one of them, and the numbers probably will. I think we didn't release these numbers. We didn't get to the end until it was announced in the fall of this past season, I believe. So.
One of your head coaches ended up getting some money last week as well from one of your colleague athletic directors. What was your reaction to the settlement with Jim Sterk? And what, if anything, came out of the SEC's review of your security policies from the Missouri game?
I'll just share quickly with you. I was pleased that Coach Staley and Jim Sterk and the University of Missouri came to a conclusion with that situation and apologized for what happened. I go to your second question, where Commissioner Sankey sent a couple of staff people over to analyze our game operations and walk through with our staffers to how everything is handled. They visited Missouri as well, and I don't think anything will come out about that except maybe some suggestions for the entire conference. I'm not expecting anything directly at the University of South Carolina. I happen to think that we run a pretty good program as far as our game management, our staffers, our security, our ushers, and I've never experienced an issue. I've been to a lot of games. I sit on the court sometimes or down on the edge, and you have fans yell things, but we got people in place to remove them if need be, and if the officials say that. Mm-hmm. So I know things happen sometimes, but I feel confident about what we do, and if there are any suggestions or changes, I expect it to be conference-wide, not just isolated to the University of South Carolina.
Hey, we thank you for being with us tonight. We know it's been a busy time being in Indy and then getting down to Destin and all that going on down there, and you'll be in Greenville, North Carolina, I'm sure, for the regional, so we'll see you there. And we thank you so much, as always, for your time.
So, Phil, I got to tell you, we flew down. We couldn't get into Destin because of the weather, so we had to go west to Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Coach Muschamp, Coach Martin, Coach Staley, and Charles Bloom. Who do you think had to drive?
You.
Yeah, they made me drive. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
So who was texting Corn back when we wanted to have you on yesterday? Because you weren't texting while driving. Was that Frank?
No, I had Bloom the far back.
Baseball people have the best eyesight.
Thanks, Coach.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Polajic, and Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, as we continue here on a Tuesday. Remember, we thank again South Carolina Athletic Director Ray Tanner just to kind of overview what we learned from the South Carolina AD last hour. He spoke about the Clemson selection in the NCAA baseball tournament. He said that basically the margin between 6 to 11 was razor thin, but there were clear things that separated all the teams from each other and why they were in the order that they were placed in. He referenced Clemson's strength of schedule being particularly low and their non-conference RPI also being low, weighed down by certain games like Kennesaw State, etc., and also talking about the Brian Bowen situation, saying we will probably find out something, or they will probably find out something from the NCAA within the next 24 to 36 hours before the 11:59 deadline tomorrow.
Well, less than that. I mean, it's only 11. Well, yeah. What is it now? It's 24 hours. Yeah,
it's 29 hours.
30, about 30 hours.
29, 30 hours.
Exact. 29.
They will find something before 11:59 tomorrow evening. You particular copy editing. What?
Just don't do like the Cleveland Browns and send in your trade selection after the office is done with it. And you have to nix it.
So there's that at least, and we also heard from him about what's going on at the SEC meetings, and really no resolution from the South Carolina Missouri investigation, if you will, the big investigation that was supposed to take place into the South Carolina practices of their security. But I guess that's a good thing from South Carolina's perspective.
Absolutely. And we are efforting to connect with Gary Gilmore at Coastal Carolina. Right now, he is scheduled to be with us and has acknowledged his plans to be with us, but they might be finishing up a practice, or he might be talking to a recruit or something.
Or watching film on LIU Brooklyn also, maybe. Who knows?
Well, you cannot laugh at any baseball team, man. You make the tournament. Everybody's got one pitcher that can beat you.
I understand.
Everybody's got an arm that can go out there and make your life miserable. So I'll do recruiting while we're trying to catch up with Coach Gilmore, and I'm sure we're going to get to him in just a little bit. But we'll start with some recruiting for you here tonight on Sports Talk. Defensive back Jamie Robinson, Cordele, Georgia, cut his list to a final 6: USC, Georgia, Michigan, Auburn, Kentucky, and UT Chattanooga. He'll make an official visit to USC this weekend. Clemson is in the Final 4 with defensive end Ruki Orahoro, River Ridge, Michigan, along with Michigan, Kentucky, and Indiana. USC's in the top 8 with running back Taj Gary of Atlanta, with Purdue, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Arkansas, North Carolina, Boston College, and Kentucky. Linebacker Derek Boykins of Concord, North Carolina, will take an official to USC this weekend. USC is strong with him, but he's not expecting to commit this particular weekend. He said unless the feeling just hits him. He's just in one of those situations where when it hits him, he'll commit. He is scheduled for an official to Kentucky on June 8th and an unofficial to Clemson on June 13th, also taking an unofficial to Tennessee. Some other prospects planning to be in for USC this weekend as they have a major recruiting weekend in June. This is taking advantage of the new rules, of course, and the new calendar. Some of the others who said they're coming in: defensive end Joseph Anderson, defensive lineman C.J. Clark, defensive end Savion Jackson, defensive back J.R. Walker, offensive lineman Anthony Wiggin, and newly committed linebacker Jamar Brown. Linebacker Spencer Lytle, Bellflower, California, will visit Clemson again unofficially June 11 and 12. He first visited in April. He has officials with Wisconsin June 8th and Notre Dame June 15th. 2020 tight end Tashawn Brooks of Dutch Fork said he's now hearing from USC, Oregon State, Kentucky, and East Carolina. He plans to go to camps at USC, Clemson, NC State, and Georgia Tech. In basketball, 6'6" Josiah James of Portugal recently added Georgetown to his offer list. USC, Clemson, Florida State, Virginia Tech, Louisville, Duke, Michigan State, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, and Oklahoma also on that list. USC and Clemson doing their best to try to keep this national prospect in state. According to Coach John Pearson at Porter-Gaud, he said that two of them are just working him really, really hard and saying, you know, you got a chance to really boost the program to be one of those in-state guys that comes in and helps lift an in-state program. So they're battling each other, and they're battling the out-of-state schools as well. Recruiters from USC, Clemson, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Florida State were through the school during the evaluation period. He's not made any recent visits because of his AAU schedule and his commitment to USA basketball that could run through June 17th. We got to make a change here. I wrote USC basketball. No, that should be USA basketball. That runs through June 17th. And then he'll shorten his list sometime after the July evaluation period and then take official visits. As we mentioned at the top of the program, A.J. Lawson, 6'6" shooting guard out of Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, visited USC this past weekend. SMU, Tulane, Creighton, and Oregon, other schools high up on his list, and we'll do a follow-up story on him to get his thoughts on that visit. 2020, 5'7", Loyal McQueen of Wilson, committed to North Carolina. We've been hearing about Loyal McQueen for the last couple of years, and now she's going to go to North Carolina. And 6'8", Michael Marsh of Gray Collegiate, committed to South Carolina State. So there you go with recruiting for now. And remember to check it out on our website, SportsTalkSC.com, and on Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting to take you to all of our recruiting stories.
More on I guess, the most newsworthy thing that we found out, now with no disrespect to Clemson seeding, but the stuff involving Bowen, I think that, you know, this information that they're going to be privy to, I'm wondering if it's the NCAA giving them a heads up on whether they're going to reinstate him, a date of reinstatement. You know, I'm also wondering, too, what decision he makes will be indicative of whatever information they get. I mean, does he come back to South Carolina if there's a suspension of, say, 10 to 20 games? Or is it something where if he's going to be eligible immediately, does he come back? I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing what I'm trying to say is we don't know what he will do unless we figure out the decision he makes.
Well, Ray, you know, as he said, he doesn't know what the information is going to be. All he knows is he's gotten some word from the NCAA to look for something between now and before midnight tomorrow night, or before 11:59 tomorrow night. Look for something, some kind of information about this case coming from the NCAA that they can give the kid and say, okay, here's what they have and what they think they're going to do. You can use this to make your decision, but you got to make it fast.
Is it smoke from the Sistine Chapel? Like, what is it? You know,
I don't know.
White smoke you can play, or black or not?
Well,
I don't know.
Here's the key. If all the reports are correct that from the information they have, the FBI has cleared him.
Yeah.
What can the NCAA have that they don't have? Because if they had it, the FBI would say, hand it over.
Well, here's the other part of this, too, and this is from what Ray spoke. I almost think that the NCAA is somehow passing the buck a little bit on this towards the Department of Justice. And they're saying, hey, our hands are tied. You know, the FBI's are involved in this. We don't want to do anything out of school with respect to them. So this is the ultimate NCAA, not us.
Yeah.
Not us, which, again, seems kind of spineless. But, again.
Well, because, you know, keep in mind now, I hear what you're saying. And that's true. I mean, they're letting the FBI do their real dirty work, but they don't have the powers the FBI has. You know, they can't subpoena. They can't make you testify and do all that kind of stuff that the FBI can certainly make you do. So they, you know, they're at a disadvantage. But this is ridiculous. You're exactly right. If the FBI has come out and said, as they have said, we got nothing on this guy, so what could the NCAA possibly be holding over his head that they have to investigate if he has been cleared by the strongest investigative agency in America, next to the CIA, I guess?
Again, like I said,
I'd hate for either one of them to be looking into me, to be honest with you.
Like I said, there's really no opinion that you can have on this than the fact that it's wrong for the kid.
You ever had the CIA investigate you? I'm just wondering.
No.
I almost interviewed with them.
For the CIA?
When I was in college, yeah.
That does not surprise me at all.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network are brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union, honoring our servicemen and women with the Founders Military Mortgage. Apply online, foundersfcu.com/mortgage, or at a Founders location where a qualified mortgage loan officer will help you through the application process. What did you get from our pain in the butt in the PD? I mean, our correspondent in the PD, Alan Smothers?
The bad boy, Alan Smothers, who chimes in with us with some good stuff and some insight. Remember, it was Alan who first gave us the thought that Coastal could be hosting a regional, though he thought it would be because Duke couldn't host. They ended up hosting on their own merits.
Yes.
According to Ray Tanner. Anyway, Alan shares with us that FBI has said that Boeing did not take any money, but they have not said that Bowen's dad did not take money. And with the Cam Newton rule in place now, the question is whether or not the NCAA is looking into that to determine his eligibility, because a member of the family taking money impacts the player. So that could be what is holding things up.
Keeping in the tradition, talking about Coastal Carolina, it's now our pleasure to welcome in the head coach of Coastal Carolina, Gary Gilmore, joining us here as his team gets ready for regional at Springbrook Stadium. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on.
Oh, listen, very honored to have an opportunity to speak to you guys. How's everybody doing?
Great, great. You know, it's not often we get back-to-back baseball national championship coaches on the program. We had Ray Tanner on a little while ago ahead of you. He's only got you by one national championship. You got a chance to even the deal this year.
Yeah, I tell you what, he's the master. He did it twice in a row and came off and closed the third time. I tell you what, man, I set him way up on the pedestal. I'm gonna tell you that right now. One of the finest men in the game, and one of the best coaches to ever put on a uniform.
No question. He just told us that you guys earned that regional, that home site, by you won the regular season, you won the tournament championship. There was nothing, like trying to help somebody out because like Duke couldn't host because of their facility, whatever. I mean, you flat out earned the right to be at home for this regional.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I wasn't sure how we would be looked at or whatever. There were a lot of very worthy teams, and very happy that we get to play in our home yard, and hopefully show the country off a beautiful ballpark, and hopefully we play very well. We've got a tough draw, with some other teams that were, especially UConn. I mean, Washington's very good. Brooklyn, Long Island won their tournament. So I'm sure they're on the high too. I know UConn was, I thought they were actually ahead of us in consideration. And I don't know if us winning the tournament, them not, was a deciding factor or whatever. But we're very glad that we're getting this opportunity. But we know we have a lot of work ahead of us.
It's a lot easier to find out information on the two schools you mentioned from UConn at the American Athletic Conference and Washington out of the Pac-12. What do you know about the Blackbirds of LIU Brooklyn?
Well, I know they found a way to win their tournament, and Bryant is always a good program. We played them 2 or 3 times, and they've always been a handful to compete against. So to find a way to beat those guys says a lot for them in my mind. And preliminarily, we gathered a ton of stuff today, so we'll try to make some final decisions tomorrow as the direction we're going to go with pitching and lineups and things like that. I'll expect them to play as well as they can possibly play, and hopefully we can too, and we'll see how it turns out.
You're the relative health of your ball club at this point in time. And also I'd like to ask you about these teams that we may not know much about. It seems to me the state of college baseball now, Coach, pitchers seem to be selecting to go to college. A lot more great pitchers are. Is that what's making these other teams so dangerous now? The pitching is spread out throughout the country?
I think a lot of that's true, but it's also, I think the professional teams are getting the guys that they feel like are, out of high school that are the closest to, getting to the big leagues. So, they get the majority of those guys. They're leaving some, good arms that are developmental arms that, are spread out throughout college baseball more so now than maybe a few years ago. But, the real cream of the crop guys for the most part, there's only a handful of schools I know that, have some magic potion that somehow they tell a kid to take himself out of the draft who's going to be in the top 15 or 20 picks, or, get a guy that doesn't sign because his signing bonus requests are so high or whatever. There's only a handful of those that fall through the cracks. I mean, most of us are, these good arms and stuff in college around us because college coaches are busting their behinds 24 hours a day, not only recruiting guys, but developing guys. We to a certain degree, you probably get, you probably get a bunch of pro guys coming in with a bus from this comment, but, we have become way more of a developmental assistance to professional baseball than it was 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Across the board. College baseball is, between analytics and videoing and all the things that we have access to. Our ability to teach and develop, is every bit as good as professional baseball.
Talking with Gary Gilmore, coach at Coastal, you told us early in the year at Baseball at the Beach that you won the national championship in 16. The 17 team was good, but maybe didn't have the chip on the shoulder. You were looking for the chip on the shoulder to return for this team. Did that develop? Is this team playing with that same kind of anger, more or less, like the 16 team did?
Yeah, this team wants to, it was a big thing this past weekend, that group of seniors I have that have become just fantastic men and great leaders during this past year have really stepped up. They one of the things they wanted to accomplish was, they were part of a national championship team. Some of them played a very small part. Some of them played a more significant part, but, they were not the dudes at that time. And they wanted to win a championship. They wanted a Sun Belt championship that they could tack on to their national championship to say, hey, we're the only class that can ever lay claim to this. We won a national title and we won the first Sun Belt title. And, we're guys that paved the road for a lot of things that go on in this program. And, they played with a chip on their shoulder. There was a lot of energy, a lot of focus. And, we're going to need to repeat that this weekend if we have any desires to beat these teams.
Coastal Carolina baseball coach Gary Gilmore, how encouraged were you by the contributions from the periphery? Woodall, Lancaster, Bierman, all those guys are going to contribute. How encouraged were you by your role players outside of your top 4 or 5 hitters contributing while you were in Lafayette?
They were fantastic. That's this lineup is a whole lot, in a lot of ways, a whole lot like the 16 lineup in that if you get through that gauntlet at the top, you think, whew, I gotten through the top 4 or 5 guys. Now I can set her on cruise control. And, those other 4 guys at the bottom, if you don't control them just like you do the top, man, they roll that lineup over and guys on the bases and things. It's a daunting lineup in a lot of ways to face. We've been handled a few times during the year like any team gets handled, but for the most part, they find ways to hurt you, whether it's the top part or the bottom part. There's some, the bottom parts, so hopefully, some guys that'll, a year from now will be guys that move up into some of those spots higher up in the lineup that are guys that can carry us as well. And, pitching wise, we got some, really, Venetiano, threw a really good game. McCambry, a young freshman, he threw a great game. We got help out of the bullpen all weekend. So, I feel good about our team, and, we can condense this thing, into basically a short series. And, I think we have a chance to win.
Coach, thank you very much as always. Good luck to you this weekend, and look forward to talking more baseball with you next week.
Yeah, let's hope we're talking about continuing to play.
You got that right. Thank you, Coach. Gary Gilmore from Coastal Carolina with us here on Sports Talk.
We go racing with Kerry Tharp next. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by the South Carolina soybean farmers. Using your data to make informed farm management decisions improves your sustainable footprint. Show your commitment to sustainability with a free truck magnet available at unitedsoybean.org/unsustainable. This message brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff of the state of South Carolina. We are expected to be joined by the president of Darlington Raceway, Kerry Tharp. We talk about how the Coca-Cola 600, pardon the pun, fell flat.
Yeah, I think he's probably still asleep from watching that race, to be honest with you. That was of course, 2 years ago, they had an even greater domination by Martin Truex Jr. I think he led every lap except for 8. And Kyle Busch led every lap but about, 20 the other day and won all 3 stages. And not a good show for NASCAR in terms of the competition.
It was a fleeting feeling I had as I was driving through Charlotte on my way back from Durham. The timing worked out as such to where I might have been able to attend that race. But I thought, it's late, it's 6 o'clock. Had to get back earlier today or on Monday for the selection show. If it wasn't that weekend, I might have tried to go do it just because I was driving back through Charlotte. But I'm kind of glad I didn't because of seeing it.
All 3 races on Sunday were blowouts.
The Monaco. I watched the Monaco. Do you watch the Monaco?
The guy that won that led every lap.
Yes.
And then, of course,
that's
Indy.
not atypical of the F1 circuit, though. That's because of the fact that it is, especially on that track, it is incredibly hard. It's the hardest racetrack that they race in because they race in the streets of Monaco. It's so hard to pass on that racetrack. There's only like 2 or 3 places of like the 20 turns that they have that you're able to pass because you have to be so slow through those roads.
It looked like Indy was setting up for a fine finish until 2 guys running up front both had to go in for fuel, and that left the guy in third wide open to win, and a very popular win it was for him. And I love watching Indy. I love watching pit stops in both Indy and NASCAR. And, NASCAR is still a bit old-fashioned. Indy's got all the new technology because you have the lifts on the car, the hydraulic lifts. When they come into the pit, they drop those lifts and the car goes up, so you don't need a jackman. And then all it takes is, instead of having the lug nuts on the tires on the Indy car, they just have one bolt, one big thing that holds the tire on.
And you get to change them all at the same time, unlike NASCAR where you got to do one side.
And they turn a stop in about 6 seconds, fuel and 4 tires in about 6 or 8 seconds.
The one thing that used to scare me, I don't know if they've changed the formula or not, but do you remember that volatile fuel they used? And if one of the pit crew spilled it on himself, you see him fanning and you didn't see anything, and they're just getting burned by that fuel.
They had one car in the pits that did catch on fire, and it was a fuel line fire, but they didn't seem to be too concerned about it. I mean, they were still working on the cars. It was in flames, and he drove off, and the car was in flames, but I think he had an onboard fire extinguisher, and I think it took care of the problem.
Yeah, and it's funny with the F1, a lot of those guys, they only run about 70, 80 laps at most of their circuits. So a lot of times they will go on only one stop. So pit stop speed is very, very key in that. As we wait, Kerry Tharp, let's give you a little bit of sampling from what Mark Kingston had to say. His Gamecocks getting ready for their regional in Greenville, North Carolina. They will play Ohio State on Friday afternoon. Winner of that game will take on the winner of ECU and UNC Wilmington. He talked about the role TJ Hopkins played in not only his team's season, but what getting him back would mean.
Well, I compare him to almost having a point guard, and you take a point guard off a basketball team, it changes everything around him. It changes the offense, it changes the defense, it changes the plays you can run. With him, he's so multifaceted. He brings speed, he brings power, he brings great defense. He's a table setter. There's just so many things he brings to the table that it's hard to replace with just one guy. So I think Noah has done a really nice job as of late, getting on base and playing a solid defensive outfield. But TJ is just one of the elite players around. So we're obviously a better team when he's in the lineup.
We talked about this was an expectation of this program to make this level. Was that brought up when it was struggle in the middle of the year? Did the guys already know that, or you coming in had to remind them of that?
Well, I think guys, when they come to this program, they know that you're coming here to try to win the next national championship and get to Omaha and be a part of the big dance. But we were at a point in this season, obviously, where it looked like it could be a long shot. So do you need to remind them of that? Yeah, you do need to remind them of that sometimes, that maybe we're not doing enough. Maybe you need to focus a little bit more. Whatever the case may be, when you're struggling as a group, as a program, everybody needs to make sure they look in the mirror and make sure that everybody is doing everything possible to try to help the program. So we've had that along the way, and obviously guys did what they needed to do, because here we are.
Coach, you had a little bit of time now since yesterday. Do you have any more impressions of Ohio State and what kind of team they are, since you really didn't know much?
Yeah, well, the one thing we do know is they'll be throwing left-handed pitcher at us. Their best guy statistically. So we have started preparations on that, and that will obviously steer, what our lineup, if we want to tweak our lineup at all. So we have a little bit more information on the pitcher we're going to face. We've done a lot of research, obviously, on their team. It's a good Big Ten team, period. It's a team that can win on any given day. They have some things they're really good at, and it's a very proud program. So it's going to be, at this point in the season, every game you play, every team you play will be a challenge.
Mark, any idea yet how your pitching rotation lines up? And also, after what you've seen this whole season, what concerns you most about your team?
Well, to me, it all starts on the mound, and we're not prepared yet to name what our rotation will be for the weekend. I still think we're going to evaluate the matchups. But to me, it all starts with our pitching. When we pitch well, we win. When we're inconsistent, when we don't throw strikes, that's when we struggle. And on some of those days, our offense has been able to bail us out, and some they have not. But when we're at our best, we're pitching really well. And that means the starters and also the bullpen. When our starters give us great outings, we tend to win that game. So I would say I won't call it a concern, because I have faith in our players. But going into this region, if we want to win this regional or the next game we play, we need to really pitch well, and that starts with our starting pitching.
How do you balance heading into a regional like this, when guys get used maybe out of the bullpen, and knowing that there maybe is a winners or losers bracket game, and you could play 4 or 5 games over the course of a short period of time?
Yeah, the biggest thing you have to do is make sure you win that day. But it also is, it's a pool game. You have to make this next shot, but you also need to understand there's another shot after that, and another shot after that. So the great majority of it is make sure you win today's game and make decisions that will help you win that game. But there's also a small part of that says, all right, if we use this guy, we may not be able to use him tomorrow. So you have to strategically know who to use based on the score, based on the matchups. So all that will go into our decision making.
Mark Kingston, from his meeting with the media today, the Gamecocks will pack it up and head to Greenville, North Carolina after practicing tomorrow. Then they'll practice at the stadium in Greenville, North Carolina. They'll be the second team on the field on Thursday. East Carolina goes out first, and USC will go out beginning at about 11:15 on Thursday. We'll be there for that, reporting on the happenings in Greenville, North Carolina. Will be at Clemson doing the same thing as the Tigers, and the teams there will be on the practice field. As far as the Gamecocks injury situation, again, as you well know, TJ Hopkins will travel. He'll dress. He'll be available right now for pinch hitting duties, perhaps. Defensive replacement, maybe a pinch runner. That's about it for him right now. Madison Stokes will remain as the DH. No plans on putting him back in the field. Looking at this Ohio State team, the pitcher the Gamecocks will face in the opener, the left-hander Connor Curlis, last pitched on May 23rd against Purdue in the Big Ten tournament opener, which was played at the College World Series Park in Omaha. TD Ameritrade. Thank you. Anyway, he was the loser in that game, 8-2. So that was his last start. This is an Ohio State team that swings it pretty well, 287 batting average, not a great amount of power, 40 home runs. They were second in the Big Ten in team batting average. The pitching is right in the middle of the Big Ten at 4.58 ERA. Where they really stand out, unfortunately for them, on the downside is their defense. My goodness, 92 errors they made this year. Their fielding percentage are dead last in the Big Ten in fielding at 958. So you hit the ball on the ground with these guys, you got a chance to get on base because they don't field it all that well.
Could you check on something when you go to Greenville? If the Rehab Dance Lounge is still in business?
Is that a dancing establishment?
Yeah, it's called Rehab.
Yeah, I'll be happy to go by there
Rehab.
for you. You leave something there?
What are you rehabbing from?
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Hope you enjoyed the show today. We heard from Ray Tanner earlier in the show on the Clemson seating. If you had a beef with the Tigers seating, it seemed like Ray gave a pretty decent response to that. Also talked about the Brian Bowen situation and the SEC meetings in Destin. You can find that on our website, sportstalksc.com. Also, Gary Gilmore from Coastal Carolina joined us to talk about his team's regional. The Chanticleers playing LIU Brooklyn coming up on Friday. That is on SportsTalkSC.com. Mark Kingston's appearance also on the program. We'll hear from Monty Lee in a moment. You had something you wanted to clear up with one of our listeners, Corn?
Oh, you want me to mention this?
Sure, why not?
Well, somebody on Twitter. I did a Periscope yesterday from the USC viewing party over at Jay's Corner across from the fairgrounds. Very nice place, by the way.
Yeah.
My first time there. And so I'm just doing a live Periscope, and I am talking about the food that they are serving. All right. And I said,
oh, yeah.
Is that what I said? Oh, yeah, or
yeah.
oh, my?
You said, oh, yeah.
As a waitress was walking by, I'm saying, boy, they got some great food here. And I go, oh, my, oh, yeah. And so some dweeb on Twitter, I think, is trying to
accuse you of being
indicate that I was oh-mying the waitress
being a
and not the
lecherous
food.
old man.
But it was the food. It was the same time that I was saying, oh, my, the waitress just happened to walk by with a platter of food, because I was watching the food passing by coming out of the restaurant area.
Anyone who's seen you would not say that's a far-fetched
to be admiring the food.
Yes, it's not a far-fetched thing for you.
Checked the mirror recently.
I have. I'm fine. I have no shame in my dad bod. No shame. No shame in my game.
Is that KT?
Apparently that is Kerry Tharp. We are joined now by the president of Darlington Raceway.
Penalty flag.
You have to come in for a little stop and go penalty there, Kerry.
I gotta go back in the take a lap. Right?
Are you still in Central Time Zone from Talladega or something? What's wrong?
Oh my goodness! Actually, I'm in an event here in Hartsville. I apologize for that, but good to be on. Sorry for the delay, but
we
good
thought
to talk to y'all tonight.
We thought maybe you were still snoozing from watching the 600.
Oh my goodness, it wasn't that bad. I mean, Kyle Busch certainly dominated. It's one of those deals, Phil, and you're a Yankees fan. You know, when the Yankees have it going on, he just kind of crushed the rest of the field. But you know, there's some good racing going on through the remainder of the field. But certainly, he led 377 laps, and that's pretty much what I would call a butt whip.
Yes,
Kerry, I heard they're using it now at the sleep siders to help people who are insomniacs.
Well, that's what I used to tell Phil. I said, Phil, read one of my press releases. It'll put you straight to sleep at night. But
I still do. I saved those. I saved those, as a matter of fact.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it was kind of what I would call one-sided. So
when he runs out of toilet paper at the beach house.
You know, when you get when you get so far out ahead, there was really no other cars that looked like that were going to catch him. And even on the restarts, he just got so far out ahead, and it looked like it was pretty much all Kyle Busch. But it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if Kevin Harvick hadn't had that issue with his tire. Maybe they would have had a little bit of a contest there, but certainly it was all Kyle Busch come Sunday night.
Yeah, Joe Gibbs' team, they were strong. Truex, of course, who 2 years ago had a dominating performance, but Toyota's in the top 3 spots, so they continue to do well. Jimmy Johnson, you know, listening to the broadcast, it's sort of a shame if you're Jimmy Johnson and the announcers are talking about a 5th place finish as being a sign of life for your team, but I guess that's how they have to look at it, considering how the season's gone for him.
Well, you know, that is kind of ironic because usually when Jimmy Johnson finishes 5th, he's not very happy. But, you know, he just hasn't had that type of season that many people thought he would have. I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you. I guess it's the Camaro. They haven't got used to it yet. But, you know, we're starting to get deep into the season, and you would think that something would shake loose. But Jimmy Johnson at Charlotte, a 5th place finish, is pretty – you know, not what you would want to jump up and down about, because he's won the Coca-Cola 600 several times. Certainly he's won the fall race and the All-Star race there many, many times. Jimmy Johnson, when you think of Charlotte, is kind of synonymous with winning. And so 5th place finish for Jimmy Johnson to be ballyhooed, I guess, is maybe moral victory, but there are no such things as moral victories, I guess.
You know, it's interesting, KT. I hate to make a cross-sport analogy, but we got people lamenting what's going on in the NBA with us seeing another Warriors and Cavaliers NBA Finals. Basically, you're looking at a triumvirate of drivers who is basically dominating all these races between, Busch, Harvick, and some of the others. But, from our perspective, I would almost think there needs to be something from NASCAR to basically say, hey, guys, outside of these three, drive better. What has to happen?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Will. I mean, it certainly has been the Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch show so far through this part of the season. And, if Harvick hadn't wrecked the other, like I said, he likely would have come out on top. But it's interesting to see what's going to happen when we go to Pocono. It's a different racetrack. It's a long racetrack. It's a flat racetrack. We'll see what's going to happen there. But it certainly has been Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch for most of the season so far, and I would think somebody's going to get after it. I mean, who's going to take the ball and run with it from here on out? And so, will we see it at Pocono this weekend? I don't know, but it's been a very interesting first part of the season, as you said. I think 9 race wins between those two, Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch, and it's starting to become really where those two are going to be the people that you look at each and every week.
Well, you weren't the only race that had a blowout. All three had blowouts, and the numbers, TV numbers for Indy, way down, and looking at the numbers for the 600, about just under 4 million. Is that considered? What kind of audience do you know that they had? Are they pleased with the TV audience that they had, as far as you know?
Well, that's probably not the best numbers that they've ever had. In fact, when I was at NASCAR, we used to ballyhoo the fact that the 600 would outdraw the 500, and so when you have races like that maybe are a little one-sided, you might not get quite the viewership that you're hoping to get. But again, Kyle Busch dominated the Coke 600, and the Indy 500 didn't really have that type of finish that you were hoping that they would have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a interesting phenomenon right now, what's going on with some of the TV ratings in motorsports and some other sports as well. But as you mentioned, you got LeBron and you got the Warriors coming up again in 4th straight year. I mean, are people really going to be interested in watching that? It'll be interesting to see how the ratings, come out when it comes to that first game here in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm fearful that a lot of people will not be watching simply because they're LeBron and they're Warriored out.
No, they'll watch the first game.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Phil, because like you said, it's 4 straight years of the same old with LeBron and the Warriors. But I mean, still, when you think about it, though, that's the best of the best. You're looking at probably the best player in the league right now against the best team in the league. So, who's going to win? But, sometimes you're looking for somebody else maybe to come in there and do something. That's why you were pulling for your Celtics to maybe pull something out, but it just wasn't meant to be.
You had to cut that open wound right there.
Really. I've just about forgotten about that. Thank you, KT.
Oh my goodness! Did I bring open
another?
Did I bring up an open wound there?
We got debris on the track because of you. We got debris on the track.
Caution is out.
Thanks for the time, KT.
Thank you all very much.
See you, KT.
That's Kerry Tharp. Man,
yeah,
nobody just keeps on cutting you, man.
Yeah, they'll watch. They'll
let it go. It's over. It's history.
The casual fan will watch because the only name they know is LeBron.
Yeah,
and Curry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did have ESPN did have their biggest rating, I think, in history for NBA with the Celtics and the Cavs in that Game 7.
So again, you missed Ray Tanner, you missed Gary Gilmore, Mark Kingston, Monty Lee on our website, SportsTalkSC.com. Talk to you tomorrow.